Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, multiple people.
People, lovely to see you all.
Right then, tell us who you are. Tell us a bit about yourself and about Hagar the womb and brief history.
We're waiting for someone to go.
You go first,
Or Beth
Ruth.
that's starting these things because she's got more experience of.
Oh, I always get it. Yeah, so here you have Ruth, Karen, and Lorna, the better half of Hagar the womb. We've never agreed how we pronounce ourselves, and we're open to offers. And we started in 1981, and we lasted till I think 1986 or 7. And
Is
then
it
we
that
started
long?
up again. Yeah. You had left before, and
No, I
funnily
had
enough,
left
this
already.
came up today because we were looking at the things that split us up for a variety of reasons, and one of them was, I think, playing with the Three Johns at Dingwalls, and half of the band thinking it was fine to do, and they loved the Three Johns, and the other half were in that anarcho-punk pay no more than mode, and they thought Dingwall's prices were too much. So that sort of got rid of 2 or 3 members of the band, that stance, and we faltered ever since, but we did get back in 2011, I think. And we've been going ever since, Marie.
That's a very good introduction. Well done, Ruth. I'm Karen, and I'm very bad at remembering dates, so I always get Ruth to explain what we did and what happened to us, because I'm not very good at remembering it. I'm more good on the day-to-day stuff, but not our history, which has been long and winding. But we've actually lasted now far longer than we lasted first time round, so we're very happy that we've managed to make, considering we reformed in order to go to Japan. Wasn't the original reason to reform to go to Japan with Gary Dirt?
Yeah, Gary Dirt was going to be our manager, and he dangled this carrot of gigs far away in exotic places in front of us. I'll get you Japan, he said.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, where do we sign? We'll sign up for you, Gary, even though we had no intention of reforming again. We were just meeting to discuss someone putting a record out. And we never made it to Japan or anywhere else with him, Marie. You might be shocked to hear that.
Did you go to America? But Mitch couldn't get in because of the visa issues.
We went, oh, you're good, you are. Yeah, we did go. That was nothing to do with Mr. Dirt. But yeah, we did go to America, and we found a wonderful local to Oakland bassist who stepped in for Mitch and was loads better than him. And honestly, if she'd not been in a different country, we would have kept her and just booted him out.
Yeah, she was a sober weightlifter, which I think is probably the furthest thing you could have from Mitch. Yeah. And she knew all our songs. She was fabulous, and she didn't wear suits, and so we loved her. But yeah, I only rejoined because I wanted to go and buy Hello Kitty merch in Japan for my children. That's the only reason I reformed. We never got anywhere. But I think we then found Hello Kitty stuff when we finally went to Oakland. But I'll now give Lorna a chance to.
I only joined the band a few years ago. Is it 2 or 3 years ago?
During lockdown, 2020.
Yeah,
that long ago?
I think it will be nearly 3 years since I first was asked to join. So it's only been a few years. But I used to be a fan back in the 80s. So it's really nice for me.
And it's nice for us as well. And if people haven't heard us yakking on about this before, Lorna actually took up guitar for us, and she learned it all through lockdown, all our tracks, and she's a bassist, obviously, Rabies Babies. So it was a really big thing for her to do, and we're so bloody grateful because she's just so good at it, and you would never believe that she'd not picked up a guitar before we asked her to. And she could have said, no, I'm a bassist, go and find a guitarist, but she didn't. We're so grateful.
We are very grateful, particularly as me and Ruth were always too lazy to learn an instrument. So we find it deeply shaming that someone else has not only learned one, but then learned a new one in order to get to us when we didn't learn anything, did we, Ruth?
No, this is why we ended up behind the microphone, because everything else was just too hard. It didn't mean that we could sing or anything. It just meant that we didn't have to play anything and learn anything. So, yeah.
I think for me, it was perfect timing to learn guitar, because there wasn't a lot of stuff going on in the outside world. So it was a really nice project of something to do when there wasn't really that much going on.
When you were locked down. Yeah. So we've got a lot to thank COVID for in several respects. But I think for us as a band, the main one is Lorna. And giving her a chance to get to grips with our stuff before we put her on the stage.
I think the only other thing we've got to thank over for, and I think this says a lot about the life of being in a punk band, is it's the only time we actually haven't lost money as a band, because we couldn't go out and play gigs, but we still sold a tiny bit of merch. We actually made a profit in lockdown.
Really?
Whereas nowadays, all our money goes on train fares and very ridiculous things. It's the only time we have ever turned in a small profit, and so it was one of the few sad things about coming out of lockdown, was that we knew we'd now spend
we weren't going to grip anymore.
Because the men won't listen to this, I can also reveal that we also have a special WhatsApp group behind their back to moan about how annoying they are to get done as well.
Yeah.
Luckily, they won't listen to this podcast, because the men don't listen to anything in relation to all the work we do to promote the band.
All girls get things done, and then
It is.
like it's we did a recording very recently, and we were talking about sort of what we do in the band as opposed to what they do. Like, you know, if you ever see them behind a merch desk, it's rare. We take photos if that ever happens, and it's usually because they're put there for a photo op or something, and then they disappear. And then, like, you know, sort of going out and getting bits and pieces in the recording. Oh, can you get me this? Can you get me that? There's just this little list of things that they never seem to do, or they disappear at gigs and never help out with. And it's almost made its way into a song.
I'm writing a song at the moment, yeah. It's
We
called
have
The
to
Girls in the Band
to
Do
play
Most
it.
Work.
Oh, God.
It does have a bit of a serious point, because we're an anarchist feminist punk band, but actually a lot of the patriarchal structures are actually maintained within our band, even though we shouldn't be doing it. We do most of the unpaid, unsung work, don't we?
We do, and then we get moaned at for our efforts. I need this, I need that. And you just think, what did your last slave die of? And have you ever considered doing it yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have caught us on a bad day. There's been bad happened.
Has there?
I've got a feeling I'll just be like this tomorrow as well, though, Karen, in fairness.
But it is an interesting thing. I would love to know whether most bands have that kind of division of labour between the genders when there are mixed bands like that. Whether certain people get lumbered with all the work and some people rat out of it or not. They're interesting thing, band. They're a family you choose to have, and they're very lovely in lots of ways. But every so often, they can be as annoying as families.
Yeah, very complex.
And I think for us as well, because we've known each other since the 80s, and that I think really comes across on stage. So it's kind of, when people see us for the first time, they come away getting that impression that we've known each other for a long, long time because of all the back and forth between us all, you know. So it's like a very dysfunctional family, because apart from Lorna, we're all original band members from the 80s, and which I don't think many bands can say that now, can they? Those that have sort of reformed or gone on over the years. You know, sometimes you're lucky to find one band member in them. I saw the Wall at Rebellion, and there were no band members in the Wall, although I loved the Wall, so I saw them anyway, and they were really good. But
now, I would say that a lot of our on-stage banter does derive from the fact that we did our A-levels together. And now we're in our 60s, and so it's been a long and lovely journey, hasn't it, Ruth?
Yeah, very long.
It's nice, you know, just to get you together. And I've had requests as well for going, oh, you've got to interview Hagar the Worm. So, or Hagar, or you got the...
Whichever.
We don't know.
What do you prefer?
I think we'd just call ourselves Hags now.
We do call ourselves Hags. Yeah. Because I don't know why we chose the name. It's dreadful. We've never understood why we
Yeah, and it's always the first interview question, isn't it? And over the years, people have had their own conclusions and they've gone away and done research. And at a certain time, they were all triumphant. It's because of Hagar the Horrible from, I can't remember, like the Daily Mirror or something like that, cartoon, which was lovely actually, because he kept getting beaten by his Viking wife Helga. She was a real broomhead. She was a tough one. So I didn't mind that comparison. But then there was something in the Bible. I mean, I don't know if any of us have ever picked up a Bible, but there was, and it was related to the womb as well. I think maybe there was a Hagar in there who had a kid or surrogate.
It was something to do with surrogacy. It was something.
Yeah. So then that was all triumphant. Oh, it's biblical. And we'd just be, what? What are you talking about? It's biblical. I found you in the Bible. So no, it seemed to fit, but there's no rhyme or reason to it, I'm afraid.
No, we only had a week before we played after we formed it, so we had to think of a name. I don't know which one of us thought of that terrible name.
I'm afraid it was me. It was only because we came out with so many and they were like all vetoed, and I think this one was so dreadful there was a silence. And so I think the silence, it was complicit silence, because it just meant that because everyone was probably too horrified to speak, it got through. And then, it just stayed, unfortunately.
I must admit, I prefer, as we go into middle age and towards the other side of middle age, I do think Hags is a much nicer name and has a lot more meaning for us now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So we tend to call ourselves
Hags. We have it on the T-shirt as well, so we try and encourage people, and we call ourselves Hags on our Facebook page and things like that. But yeah, we'll just say for long, call us what you want, but for short, it's Hags, and that's a happy compromise, really.
And were you at the first gig, Lorna? Did you see it? Were you like, who is this band? The name. Did it? What attracted you to Hagar the Womb as an audience member?
It was when I was a teenager. My brother and me used to buy records, but we didn't have loads of money, so it was really every couple of weeks we'd get a record, and we had this sort of, like, almost like a competition who could get the most obscure record with the weirdest sounding name. And my brother got the Word of the Womb. He brought that home, and then we put it on, and I just loved it as soon as I heard it. And so yeah, I listened to that loads, and I made my own shirt of Hags that I used to wear all the time. But I didn't see Hags until, I think it must have been about 85, 86, around that time. And I saw them play at some little pub, up the room upstairs in a pub. But that was the only time that I saw them. So I was really excited when the band reformed in 2011. And I thought that they were really good. It was really exciting to finally be able to go and see them loads. So then getting the call asking if I wanted to join was like,
yeah, we didn't actually have anyone else in mind, and all of the band were unanimous, which is rare to unheard of.
Yeah. And also like crazy to ask someone to join a band that can't play a guitar.
Yeah, absolutely. And we haven't regretted one bloody minute, have we? No. We were just like, Lorna, we'll wait for you. Thank fuck for COVID.
We didn't realise how much you can play the flute, can't you? You can play lots of things, can't you, Lorna?
Well, me and Marie were in a band together.
Yeah, we were, yeah.
See, no disrespect, Marie, but I always said to Lorna, you're my favourite puke, because we'd have like Spice Girls, except then there were so many of you, we kind of ran out of choosing because there was too much choice. But yeah, Lorna was my favourite puke.
Yay!
Oh.
I felt like I was very much in the background, sort of. Yeah. Everyone's gone quiet.
There was so
I think
many
with
of
the Dukes,
us.
it
There
was
was.
overwhelming
The
watching
Dukes.
you because there were so many of you, and the lineup seemed to just expand and expand and expand every time I saw it. So it just got more and more overwhelming. But I think Lorna always had this great big grin on her face, and she'd be bopping up and down, and I just loved that. I loved that enthusiasm. And so, yeah, I made her. I don't think you were ever aware of it, or maybe you were, Lorna, because if I saw you, I would have definitely run up and fangirled you and told you. that she was my favourite puke for that, because she'd just be hopping up and down with this massive grin on her face, like she is on stage with us and Rabies Babies.
Yeah, no, she manages to make
it's just
very
Lorna.
cheerful, doesn't she? Even when she has to stand right next to Mitch, and Mitch does disgusting things to her.
Oh.
I meant he pulls funny faces to her, and she carries on smiling.
Yeah, I was going to say, you better qualify the disgusting things in case.
No, Mitch is lovely actually. When I first started playing with Hags, Mitch likes to interact with anyone nearby when he's playing. He really likes to make that sort of show, which is really good. But when I'd only been playing guitar for a few months and I had to really concentrate on every chord, it was really, and I remember saying to him, look, Mitch, just give me like a few months before you start trying to put me off playing, because I can't cope with any distractions at the moment. But now I feel more confident about when he'll like, I don't know,
get down on his knees.
Gets down on his knees.
To put on a show. I mean, it looks really good when people are watching, but when you've only just learned guitar, it's quite difficult to deal with.
It's the suit and the movements, but he's very lovely off stage.
Yeah. We actually had to tell Karen, people were a bit concerned that she was pretty rotten to him on stage, and she kept beating him up, and that he needed like some sort of intervention. So we actually had to tell Karen to go gentle and be kind to Mitch. So she was trying to be kind, and then it all fell apart actually with our last gig that, God, it seems ages ago, at Bearded Theory, where Mitch got lost and only turned up like literally 10 minutes before we were due on stage, by which time we were just nervous wrecks. Because we didn't know whether we'd have him. There was no signal or communication, and then he just strolled in, and I think we spent all our time on stage dealing with the fact that he was there, absolutely carefree, and we were just like little knots of anxiety. So Karen released all of that anxiety on stage, and someone put a comment up on Facebook after, I've never seen a bassist so hated by the rest of the band. So I thought, oh, we've got to try and be kind to Mitch again. We slipped up.
I love him dearly, is what I can say. It's a performance.
I've got a Lorna story myself. She's worried now. She's like, oh no.
Oh no.
It's a good, well, I think it is. When I first moved down to, I might have told you this, Lorna, when I first moved down to London, I was a teenager, I was 18. And Rabies Babies were one of the first bands I went to see out in the whole punk, London punk community band, whatever scene. And it was at the Lord Cecil, either Lord Cecil or Tottenham Swan. And you were like the only band out there that seemed to have female members. And I just loved watching you, and I was like, who's the girl band, and what's the name of the band with the girls? And I used to come and see you, and I used to have Danielle singing, didn't you, at first, and then it just became the three of you. And then you became what you are today. Well, drummer changes. But yeah, it was really nice to see that, especially at that time, because even though it was like the early 90s, it was still very like male dominated. Like all the gigs, it'd just be boys playing, guys playing, and it'd be you guys, and you'd dress up and you'd have fun, and it was really nice to see. And it got me started. I'm like, oh, I fancy starting a band, and and then there you go.
I didn't know that. That's lovely.
Did you know that? Did you not know?
No, that's really nice.
Oh.
But yeah, we were pretty much the only band with women in for such a long time, like a really long time. And I think it is really important. Like with Hags, when I was a teenager, I could really sort of see myself in, even though I wasn't in Hags, but I really
It was a premonition.
seeing a band that sort of looked a bit like me, dressed, wearing clothes that I would wear, that singing about stuff that I could relate to. And I think that that's a really important thing. And, you know, Hags have never been some sort of virtuoso, really amazing, like technically great band or anything. But I think that that's, and the same with Rabies Babies, I think it's more important to connect with people. And when especially young women can sort of see themselves, then it really inspires, you know, more bands. And I've had that like a few times with Rabies Babies. People have told us that they were, well, women were inspired to start a band because they saw us. And I think it's seeing a band where you're like, I could do that. Like, I can totally do that. It's such an important thing, really important. And it's so brilliant now that there's so many young women making bands and playing. Like, now it's so not unusual to go and play a gig where there's other women on stage. It's sort of weird when there isn't more women on stage.
And that they're really young. Most of them are really, really young, because we do a lot of Loud Women gigs, which is such a fantastic organisation for giving bands like us all through the ages, but female fronted, or, you know, with women in them in some shape or form, a stage, a voice, a platform. And we've had so many people come up that we've played with and said how inspiring we are. And it's an age thing as well, because they can see us sort of in our 60s now, getting on stage, and they're in their 20s. Some of them haven't even reached their 20s yet. And they're thinking, oh, wow, maybe I can keep going over the decades. You know, maybe it's not something I'm going to be doing for the next 2 or 3 years. And then I'm, you know, going to have sort of kids and a career and, you know, just leave it all behind. Maybe it can carry on. So it's one of the best things, the best feelings, isn't it, when you get sort of approached after you've got off stage and you're all sweaty and and you get these like wonderful young women coming up. I sound like such an old lady now. Wonderful young women.
but you're right. But sometimes they say things like, "You're the age of my grandmother and you're out at night." But then, as Ruth says, it probably does inspire them to think they don't have to stop. There isn't a cut-off point. You can carry on as long as you can get up on that stage.
Yeah, definitely. And you had vice versa as well. And she got on stage not long before she, you know, left this mortal coil. And I think she released her first single or EP when she was 44. And she had like 2 children. She's always been an inspiration, you know, since I was young.
And she was the only one that we had in the anarcho-punk scene. So she'd turn up when they played at the Anarchy Centre, or we'd go and see them, and we'd go up to her, wouldn't we, Karen, and go, "You're so inspirational. When I'm old, I want to be like you," which wasn't probably the best thing to say in hindsight, but she took it really, really well.
She was lovely to us.
So lovely. Do you remember she gave you Tampax advice or period advice?
Yeah.
Had a really bad period at the Anarchy Centre. She was like a sort of surrogate mum to us when there weren't hardly any women around. Female figures, and especially that were older, you know. So she was always our heroine in that respect, wasn't she?
Oh, definitely, because even though Crass inspired us, I think they felt a bit more remote. Even though they started off the Anarchy Centre, we didn't have the same kind of connection. But vice versa was always, you know, was around a lot and was very inspiring and took us kind of gabbing away at her really nicely and very kindly, didn't she? She was very sweet.
Yeah, and she let us record our demo at Eccentrics as well. She was just so helpful to us, you know, and not in a you know, it wasn't that we were in and out of each other's houses or pockets or anything like that, you know, but we'd bump into her and have a few words, and that would be it. And you always felt like, oh wow, you know, there she goes. She's our hero. You know, she's our standard bearer, isn't she? She was the only one that was. We didn't have others, and now you can't really say that. There's so much to choose from.
No, it's not. I mean, we did used to genuinely usually be the only women on a bill, and you know, we did get called things like silly little girls, or we were taken unseriously, and you know, to some extent, we wanted to be seen as jollier than some of the bands and things like that, but we didn't want to be put down in the way that some people did see us. And in a way, it's very nice not to have to go through that anymore. And we hope that, you know, the younger bands and things like Loud Women and people supporting each other in a way that wasn't necessarily around quite so much when we were there first time, I think does, you know, it's a really lovely thing to see. And so much more diversity in bands. You know, it did seem to be young white men when we started that seemed to be, And
I think there still is quite a way to go though as well.
Definitely.
That still now on bills there seems to be this sort of hierarchy of the men get the best slots and that sort of thing goes on. And I think as well with like childcare, I've really noticed that when men have children, then it makes no difference. They can still carry on playing in bands, and it makes absolutely no difference to them at all. But when women have children, it's so much more difficult for them to carry on playing. And I really noticed that when Laura had her son, we didn't play for sort of a little bit when he was first born, and then we sort of came back to playing gigs. And because she's a single mum, it meant really, like, every time that we even have a band practice, we had to find childcare. And for a while, when her son was a baby, we practiced at a place where the woman who ran the studio was a friend, so she would take care of the baby, which was an amazing thing to be able to do. And I think that that's something that would be a really great thing to see in the future, where studios have a creche. You need to go out and make a load of noise and play music is mums of young kids.
Oh God,
and that would just be such a brilliant thing for women to go and be able to have a few hours away from their kids and just make noise themselves rather than always be listening to the baby noise instead.
And you go to so many gigs. I remember, like, I never stopped going to gigs even though I wasn't in a band, and the women that were there, they become less and less visible. Then it would be like mostly men, and then there'd be a few women dotted around, and I'd say to sort of friends after we'd caught up over the years, you know, where's your partner? Where's it? Oh, she's at home with the kids. And then I realised it's all men. Most of the audience is men, because all the women are keeping looking after the kids and housekeeping and, you know, sort of locked away out of sight. They're actually invisible. They might want to go out, but they've just accepted it's their partner who goes out and enjoys all these things, and they don't. And it was really sad to have that realization. And I thought, God, I'm one of the lucky ones.
I think I've always been lucky because I've had a partner who understands how much I need to go and see music, and so I actually go and see more music than he does. But I do realise that virtually every gig I go to, the men far outnumber the women. And me and my friend went to see a film about Fugazi about a month ago, and we realised we were the only two women in the cinema watching a film about hardcore punk, and there was no other women in there, and both of us love Fugazi, but you just don't quite understand why that division has built up and why there is that difference. And it can't just be about to do with who loves that music or anything like that. There must be factors like childcare or money or expectations on who wants to go and see that film.
It's a good example because it's an older band, isn't it? And so it's the people who would have seen them when they were active in the 80s who would have wanted to see that film. And again, so you've got a microcosm of how it is with all these guys there from that period of time, but the women are missing.
I think there was, especially in the 90s, I mean, like to take Fugazi, in the 90s, there was a real sort of gatekeeping of sort of, especially hardcore punk bands, where I remember going to hardcore shows where there would be hardly any women there at all, and people handing out flyers and just ignoring me and my friend and not even giving us a flyer for
That's
things,
cool.
like completely blanking us, like we don't exist at all. And that was quite a common thing, in especially in the 90s in the hardcore scene. It was really like you weren't wanted, you weren't accepted in that scene at all. It was it was completely full of misogynists who hated women.
And it's funny because it's not what the scene would have said it was about.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like the anarcho scene in the 80s. The reason we started or formed was because we were being totally ignored, our opinions and what we thought could be going on in the autonomy centres, the anarchy centre that we all really met up in every Sunday, was known as. And we'd meet in the toilets there, and it was our little place that we could just, you know, have a chat and have a little moan. And then we just thought, fuck it, we're going to form a band as well. Let's see what they're going to do with that. You know, are they going to put us on the gig roster here? You know, and I think we got offered a gig because they didn't think we could do it. You know, and that was the reason we were offered it, and that's why it was so soon after we formed. And we needed songs and equipment and a name, and we needed all of that in place because we didn't actually want to be in a band. So we never started formally because we wanted to play music and we had things to say. It was like a fuck you, this is our, you know, this is our way of trying to get a voice in here. You know?
Yeah. And did you ever get any comments when you were on stage, any negative?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot. I think if we had anything, if we wore anything colourful, which we did, you know, then we'd get compared to Rubella Ballet. That was their only other sort of frame of reference with all the day glow. So like, oh, you're Rubella Ballet wannabes. If we weren't compared to one of the only other bands with women in at the time, it was just, as Karen had said before, like silly little girls. You know, you're not proper anarchists, you're not all in black, you don't sing about war all the time, you don't look like us, you're not in our group, you know. And not that they said that to us, it was just distilled into silly little girls.
And Lorna, when you started with your bands, like the 1990s, was it? And the noughties, what did you get? What was it like for you? What?
I remember one time I used to play with this this sort of really like indie band. I played in quite a few indie bands. I was playing in an indie band, and we got put on in Brixton with UK subs, and we were so not compatible. Like we were this really nice with a female singer, sort of nice indie music. And I remember playing this gig, and we were on before UK subs, and these like a few like punk guys were really trying to intimidate us, like really standing right at the front of the stage and like making faces or shouting things and stuff. And I remember feeling really proud of the singer because she handled it so well. Like she, by the end, I feel like she got everyone around to us where they weren't being actively horrible to us. So yeah, I suppose really Rabies Babies was the first band that was really on the punk scene that I joined, and I really loved it. But yeah, we got loads of shit off people, and still, I think still do to a certain extent. People, they expect if you play in a punk band and you don't look really punk, then you get sort of shit for that as well. And I think with Rabies Babies, especially after when we became a three-piece, we started really dressing up in weird outfits just for our own amusement, really, as much as anything else. So we'd turn up to play gigs. We went through this stage of wearing these little sort of pink dresses that were really unfashionable at the time. And we'd turn up to the gig and people would look at us like we were proper care in the community and we shouldn't really be out on our own at night. Like really, really giving us looks. And then we'd start playing on stage and everyone would be like, what? What is going on? These girls look like they're going to be some really nice little girly band, and then we'd just start shouting and swearing. So I think anything that you do really as a woman, you just get people telling you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, it's funny because I've just come back from Rebellion, so I go year after year. Absolutely love it, and nothing sort of happened this time. But the last time we played, the next day I think I wore just a black T-shirt. It didn't have a band's name on it, and this guy was going around taking photos of all people with their band T-shirts, and he made this real point of having a go at me for not having a band T-shirt and not like, you know, why haven't you got a band T-shirt? You need it. And it was this whole sort of point about uniform. It just felt, you know, that people have this expectation of what punk is, all going back to what people think. And so it's not really a comment necessarily even about women, but it's about the uniform, you know, what people think that a punk should look like and a punk should wear. And I purposefully went along this year without one band T-shirt or any T-shirt. I just had very sensible tunic tops that cover your bum, just a staple of the older lady. And I felt quite proud to be there with my little tunic tops that you wouldn't have a second look at me in the street if you passed me. But I loved that being anonymous and just being there, but not feeling that you had to be there in a certain way, which you don't. You know, I really hope I don't give the wrong impression of Rebellion, because if you've been there, you'll know how wonderfully all sorts it is. But yeah, it's that sort of nod to the punk uniform. We've always been very sort of anti that in our day. In first time round, it was because we weren't wearing all black, and we'd go to jumble sales, wouldn't we? And honestly, we'd look like a jumble sale.
I mean, some of the things now I see the pictures of us.
Old skirts, you know, whatever we could find, everything mismatched, everything, you know. Rubella Ballet, at least they were very coordinated. They had their own very distinct style of day glow. You know, we'd go along, and it's, I guess, like the old fashioned, you know, all vintage and things like that are the modern day equivalent now. But, you know, we just find the most weird and wonderful combinations. And there's pictures of us in the 80s on stage. Yeah. In all our glory, Karen. And those pictures stay on the internet forever.
You don't look bad. You don't look bad at all. You look quite unique.
That's a very polite way.
But I've never looked at a picture of you in the 80s and gone, that looks really bad. I've not thought that anyway. But
I'm proud that we did what we did at the time, and we were a real nod. It was almost like the make do and mend spirit, wasn't it, of the 40s and 50s? We just like find things, patch them up. You know, we were real. But again, it very much like now, it was very much not going along with the uniform. Not that there is a uniform now, you know, everything's so, thank fuck, much more diverse than it was.
How did you get involved with Loud Women?
I don't know. Did Kathy approach us?
I think so. And we'd noticed, because when Cassie started it up, so they've got that very distinctive logo. And I always thought, oh, that's not for bands like us. You know, we've got a few men in and we're like a lot older, and they seem to just have this roster of sort of ever increasing wonderful new bands that we'd never heard of. And then, yeah, bless her, she did get in touch, and she offered us gigs. And some of the Loud Women gigs we've played have introduced me to like my favourite bands, like Twat Union at the moment is one of, I totally love them. And we played with them. They came on first. We only caught one song, but it was enough, you know. And then Pushy, who one of them is like pregnant again at the moment, but they were known as postpartum a punk band, celebrating being young mothers and singing about lots of things, but you know, through the perspective of being young mums, and you know, just having fun and being in a band, but obviously having all their responsibilities alongside it. So you know, there's so many different bands that have played through Loud Women, but I'm just really grateful that Cassie got in touch with us, and now we pop up and on their roster now and again, and meet another load of wonderful new bands that we'd never have heard of. So
you just always know that if you're going to be on one of the Loud Women evenings, it's going to be a great night. You're going to find at least 2 bands you love. You're going to make some friends. You're going to follow them forever on social media. And it's amazing now to see them do festivals in Australia, across the world. You know, it's one of those things, and the rebellion introducing and things like that. And I think it is having a very profound effect, and probably also inspiring women to act as promoters and, you know, work across the music business as well. And so I think it's one of those things that can only be really good for diversifying the scene. I think it's a really positive thing.
Oh, definitely. It's nice to see Loud Women grow. It really is. So what about your involvement with More to Hate? That was a nice experience working with Colin, maybe not. I don't know. Your faces. I'll let you do the talking. I'll ask no more questions.
That was a sort of very poignant time at Rebellion, this one, because of there was a tribute, and then obviously Conflict played without him, and it did make me think back to the early days of More to Hate. And to be honest, I always felt he went out on a limb with us, because people were sort of treating us, as I said, like a joke band, not taking us seriously. And when he asked us to be on More to Hate, you know, I sort of joked and said, oh yeah, we'll be on More to Hate if you give us badges with our name on them, because we were just making our own badges over the top of Rubella Ballet's badges at the time, because they had plentiful supply of these wonderful little Dayglow badges, because they knew people who worked in better badges, and we just get stickers and put our own name on top of their badge. And we wanted like proper badges. And he looked so shocked when I said that. I don't think he'd ever get a response like that again. But he just said, yeah, I'll get you badges. And he did. And so we did More to Hate. And I don't think I realised until very recently that we were actually the second record out on More to Hate.
Really?
Conflict's own The Serenade Is Dead.
Oh my God.
And then Word of the Womb, and then it was Lost Cherries. So it was kind of in that order. So yeah, I was just thinking it would have been really nice to have sort of More to Hate bands, whoever's together like at the moment, to do some kind of little tribute of their own, because I think, you know, Colin, everyone in a band will say maybe they had difficulties with Colin over the years, but the one thing he really did was stick his neck out on the line for us and get us signed up, and then do like various tours and gigs with Conflict, and it basically got us a profile that we hadn't had before. You know, we were a More to Hate band, and it opened doors, and it just got us to different, you know, we never made it to Japan and various other places second time round. The first time round, we only made it abroad once, to Holland over the Christmas period once, but at least we got to go up and down the land with Conflict. So at least we got to visit the basements of different cities at night time, and then back in the van after chips for another city. Yeah, and they were absolutely brilliant to be with, you know. And it's lovely seeing like Big John now. He's always like a sort of big brother to us, you know. So and then obviously Paco, you know, when Paco was alive, and Colin was always lovely and charming to us. He really, really was a kind person, but he also sort of, you know, just did things and didn't really think through the consequences of them. So he rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way, not just us. And over the years, we had like a fallout with him, but on a one-to-one basis, you know, he could charm the birds off a tree. And so you might just be thinking daggers about him if he'd done something to upset you. Then you'd see him, and then like 2 minutes later you're laughing and joking, and it's all kind of forgotten. That was the nature of him. So yeah, I'll always be grateful, because I do think that he took a punt on us where other people hadn't. So
yeah, I can't imagine anyone else who would have given us that opportunity at all. He was a very brave person in that respect.
And we weren't a conflict type band. We really weren't, and that was the amazing thing. But he could see through that. He could see sort of through what other people couldn't about us. And he was just so hands-on. He was there for all of the recording of The Word of the Womb. He actually did his "Come On Then" trademark shout in the middle of Dress to Kill when we asked him to. He made sure that me and Karen's like, no, don't. If you put that on the record, I'll kill you. He kept that in when he didn't want him to. And people love that about the song, and they say, well, he was right. I can see that now. At the time, maybe not so much. But yeah, so I have good memories.
I was going to ask you, Ruth, the film Zilla Days, She's a Punk Rocker, and you were on it, and you were talking about, tell me if you don't want to go any further, right? You're talking about when your dad asked you to leave home because you dyed your hair red. I remember watching that thinking, what happened next? I know you joined the Hags and was, but what happened?
It's so weird because he kicked me out. It's so funny because I had red hair under my roof for about 4 or 5 months, and I wore a beret at home and he never knew. And then one day I was going to the Moonlight Club, going to a gig in West Hampstead where I lived. And I walked past him in the street and I had my hair all spiked up in a Mohican, and I thought he won't notice me because he doesn't know I've got red hair. And when I got home, the shit had hit the fan. And he did know his own daughter, surprisingly, and I was told to leave, and I was 17. But the really good thing was that a week before that happened, so Kill Your Pet Puppy, Tony D from Kill Your Pet Puppy, Puppy Mansions was also West Hampstead. They lived sort of right opposite my old school, Hampstead Comprehensive on Westbere Road. So they basically, Tony D had come round the week before all this happened and said, there's a room going at Puppy Mansions. And I said, oh, no, thanks, Tony. I'm really cozy where I am. Thanks very much. And a week later, I was knocking on their door asking to be let in, which thankfully they let me in. And I had the most wonderful years after that at Puppy Mansions, and then with Karen at Nettleton Road in New Cross, where Mitch is still now. Mitch lives in my old bedroom in Nettleton Road.
He's the treasurer, isn't he? He's the treasurer of the co-op now.
There. So after that, it was the making of me, because I was like in Puppy Mansions while Kill Your Pet Puppies were being produced on the kitchen table every however often, and these wonderful characters would come in and out. Brett, who lived there, did the cover of Word of the Womb with the teddy bear and the giraffe, and he based it on this picture of a giraffe that I drew in my bedroom, and I put an old frame around it that didn't have a picture. It was a pretty rubbish giraffe, whereas he did a really good giraffe on the cover of Word of the Womb. And I've somewhere got an old photo of Mitch posing by that giraffe on my old bedroom wall.
I've never understood why we had that as a cover.
Yeah, and that's how that came about. I said, we need a cover for this Water Hate recording. And Brett was such a brilliant artist, but there were so many wonderful people who just either lived there, Alistair, or just came in and out, and were, we'd all go off to gigs together. And we had Elaine, who lived there as part of our backing singers, because we wanted a Pepsi and Shirley. So we had Elaine and her friend Jane come up on stage and just do backing and dancing like Pepsi and Shirley. It was wonderful, and all of that was due to being kicked out. So my dad did me the biggest favour at the time, because I wouldn't have grown up in that way if he hadn't kicked me out. But I was just so lucky that Kill Your Pet Puppy were around the corner and they had a space for me, because I don't know what would have happened if that hadn't happened. So
did you ever make it up with your dad, or was it with
well, he's dead now, and it was a really weird one because he kind of got dementia and he didn't realise who I was, and so I lived under the same roof with him for several years without him really sort of understanding, or if he did understand who I was, he couldn't remember the sort of chucking out incident. So we had this very sort of peaceful existence without any animosity when he started losing his mind.
I mean, I was very lucky. I had very liberal parents, but even my parents were very cross when they had to pay for me. I once dyed my hair blonde after I'd had my hair, and my hair went green, and my head teacher threatened to expel me. But I was very disappointed because my parents were really liberal. Nothing I did as a punk rocker really offended them. And so I had the opposite of Ruth, that I really wanted to annoy them. And they really liked Bob Dylan and things like that. So I really wanted to do something incredibly shocking that they would be horrified by, and never in my years of anarchist punk did I manage to shock them at all.
But Ruth, sorry, like going back to you, what about your mum? Did she say anything, or was it?
She was very, I think she met my dad in London. She was very sheltered. She was German, and it was her first trip abroad. And then she met this guy who'd come over sort of almost, he got kicked out of Iraq and he ended up in France for being a communist, apparently. But then, you know, as you get older, you get more right-wing, don't you? I think that's what happened. So she was quite young when she met my dad, and he was quite controlling, I think. And so she was always in the background saying, you know, come in, take what you want in the fridge, you know, you can, have you got enough food to eat and stuff like that. So she was always caring, but very much in a subdued background way, you know. And I always used to think, God, she needs to speak up, you know, she needs to this, and it's not right the way he's doing it and just controlling everything. But she didn't. That was her way. That was her way of dealing with him, was to sort of work around him.
So it sounds a lot like a domestic abuse situation, but you know, maybe I'm reading too much into that.
Well, it goes, you know, it's a spectrum, isn't it, Marie? It's a controlling, dominating personality, and the other people around need to work out how they counter it. Like, do they try and dominate too, or do they try and work round, or do they leave, or do they, you know, there's several times I thought, what's she doing with him? But, you know, she loved him, and there wasn't abuse in terms of like physical abuse, you know, but it was definitely one of the sort of his word goes, you know, and it had always been that way. And I think because she was a lot younger than him, and that was her first proper relationship, so he was never really challenged, and he was never really challenged by any of the kids either, apart from me. So, you know, I think it's always, when you mention controlling, it's such a triggering word, isn't it? You know, but maybe I should have said dominating personality, because he very much, you know, he was the provider, and so he basically felt he had the say in how the household was run.
I think as well, it's like in those days, that was so normalized as well. It was always like the man of the house gets the final word, and I mean, it was only sort of in the early 70s when women, they made it so women could earn the same as men, even though it's still not actually fair wages, is it, even now? But at least legally it was made. It was only in the 90s when they made it so women couldn't get raped by their husbands. It's like in, you know, the 70s. It was such a long time ago when you look at how things have changed. And just look at things that were on TV in the 70s.
Yeah.
It was awful. You can't really watch hardly anything that was on in the 70s without being completely shocked that was so normal. And that's what we grew up being force-fed, these sort of just awful misogyny and racism and homophobia was just completely normal in those days.
Definitely, but I think that's also why punk seemed like such an exciting escape and seeing people, you know, wearing kind of rubber clothes or naked and shouting and screaming and things like that. And so a lot of the anger and frustration when you were growing up, and you could see it kind of coming out in a, you know, cultural revolution. That's why one of the reasons why it was so attractive to me, punk, was that I did feel very cross and angry and frustrated and felt, you know, things aren't fair. And that was a way of, you know, getting it out. And it seemed very, very exciting, particularly when you see documentaries of the 70s now, and you realise how miserable, you know, there were so many things were going on. You know, punk did seem a way out of all of that.
And yeah, I'm so grateful that we had that. And I don't know what it would, you know, we were the sort of children of the Cold War, weren't we? So we all grew up thinking we were going to blow up, not grow up, you know. And what was the point of having a mortgage? What was the point of looking to the future? Because we weren't going to be there, because, you know, we were going to get nuked. So we had all of that hovering over our heads, and those scary films, educational films like Threads, coming out, and watching those at school, you know. And it was a really tough sort of time to be a teen. And if we hadn't had punk, you know, that would have been the backdrop of our existence as teenagers.
And also one last thing as well, Love, Sex, Hate, Sexism. You were heavily involved in that years ago. Could you tell me a bit more about that? Because it just seems to have disappeared, or maybe I'm just not as involved as I used to be.
No, it's not. It's not going anymore. I'm not exactly sure when it sort of officially finished, but I think it just sort of it ran its course. And the time when it started was because there was some sexual assaults within the punk scene, and a small group of us just wanted to do something about it. So we formed Love, Sex, Hate, Sexism, and made like flyers and used to hand out flyers at gigs, and we'd have like a stall with flyers on, and people would come and talk to us about stuff. And then around the time, so it must have been about 10 years ago, when Laura was pregnant with her son, she decided that she wasn't going to carry on doing the stall anymore once the baby was born, because she said she probably wouldn't be going out that as much, and so she didn't want to go out. And it felt really at that time as well, where a lot of people were coming and telling us really sort of quite heavy things. So you go to a gig to see a band, and then there'd just be the band that you really wanted to see would just be starting to play, and then you'd have somebody talking about a really bad sexual assault that they had really bad trauma from, and it felt more and more like that was happening. And it felt Laura didn't want to really carry on doing it, because she wanted to go out and enjoy herself when the baby was born, because she said she wouldn't be going out as much. So but also as well, I think for both me and Laura, we felt that we weren't trained. We didn't have any training in talking to people about their trauma, and really all we could do is you know, say, well, it's not your fault, and you can get more help from maybe these places. But it felt like we were out of our depth, and it felt really like we were out of our depth. So me and Laura decided that we were going to not do Love, Sex, Hate, Sexism anymore, and instead we were going to have more things within Rabies Babies show. Like we started doing a consent speech halfway through the set, and I'm writing more songs that address things like sexual assault and sexism and stuff. So that's how we sort of left. And then I think Deanna was still doing it, but then she moved back to Canada at the start of lockdown. So it was probably about 2016 when me and Laura stopped doing it. And then I think it lasted for a couple more years with different people doing it. And it's not going anymore. But I think it was a really important thing. I'm very proud that I was part of that, because I think it was a really important thing at the time. And it sounds absolutely crazy now to think that people would get really upset with us that we were literally handing out a leaflet explaining what consent meant, which is such a fundamental thing that you shouldn't even have to explain to people what consent means. But literally we would get a load of shit off people, and so I think that it did a lot of good at the time, and it brought to the forefront things that how much sexual assault was going on in the punk scene, and I think now since then there's been all like the Me Too thing, which now when a man gets accused of sexual assault, like a man in a band within the punk scene, it's not unusual for their record label to drop them, or for there to be some action. Not always, like still men are really getting away with loads of stuff, but now it is more usual for there to be action taken about it, which is a positive thing. It's totally not it's not a solved problem. There's still loads of sexual assault goes on, and sexism, and awful things go on, and men get away with stuff. But I think it is better than it was like 10 or so years ago.
Yeah. You think women have got more of a voice than we did, you know, or anybody else has been sexually assaulted, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's been obviously, I think we've had the situation where, like, it was just nice for you to say about how you felt in, about how you've been treated in certain situations when you've spoken up about stuff. And I've had that too. And I sort of felt alone with that. And it's like other people have been there too, other women have been there too. So it's not nice, but it's also, or somebody else has felt that way. So you feel less alone. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely.
But I think as well, also, I mean, especially when we were doing the Love, Sex, Hate, Sexism, and then Rabies Babies were being more vocal about stuff like that. We had a couple of times where we had people actively, like one guy that was a promoter of loads of gigs around that time, phoned me up to warn me off from not saying stuff like that, and saying that I was spoiling the scene and I should just keep my mouth shut and not be making trouble. And I remember at the time, after that conversation, feeling really energized, because I knew that he was really shitting it. Like it really felt like it. We're actually doing something. We're not being ignored. If people are scared of what we're saying, then we're saying something.
And they're trying to warn you off.
Yeah, I think when people are trying to warn you off and trying to put you down and trying to shut you up, then that's the time when actually you can be like, yeah, actually we're saying something that is frightening these people. But it is awful when you're trying to say something that you really strongly believe in, and there's people rubbishing you, and you get that with in all walks of life, like people that are famous people standing up, say for Palestine or whatever now, then they'll have their name dragged through the mud because people want to shut them up.
So Hagar the Worm in 3 words.
Fun meets fury.
Rabies Babies in 3 words.
Budgie, cat,
Cat budgie.
What's the name of the song?
Dog Cat Budgie.
There we are. How many words was that?
Explain. We just started doing a new song called Dog Cat Budgie because I have a budgie, and Goff, our drummer, had a dog, and Laura had a cat. And I think it really sums up our different personalities as well through our pets. And we just thought, Dog Cat Budgie, everyone likes at least one of those things.
Okay, guys.
Lovely to see you.
And you too.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Take care.
Yes, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Punk Rock Creatives podcast. That was Hagar the Womb with a little bit of Rabies Babies. See you next time.